Air Canada says it is finalizing contingency plans to suspend most of its operations as talks with the Airlines Pilots Association continue.
The company says the sides remain far apart ahead of a September 15th deadline. Air Canada says unless an agreement is reached before then, either party may issue a 72-hour strike or lockout notice. Air Canada says in the event of a strike or lockout, it would then initiate a 3-day wind-down plan. The Airline Pilots Association represents more than 5,200 pilots at Air Canada and Air Canada Rouge. Air Canada says customers whose flights are cancelled would be notified and also would be eligible for a full refund. Let's talk more about this. John Gradick joins us this morning, a lecturer at McGill University's Aviation Management Program. Good to speak to you, John. So the pilots holding out for this significant wage hike here. So put this into context for us. Are they considered underpaid right now on a global scale, or is this just equity?
No, this is basically underpay. I think that the Air Canada pilots are coming off a 10-year contract that was created back in 2014. And there's a significant change in the economic conditions around the world, and particularly with pilots in the U.S. who've been getting some pretty interesting wage increases in the last 24 to 36 months. And the Air Canada pilots are basically saying, no, time for us to catch up.
Do you have a sense of how much of a raise they might be looking for? Like, how far behind are they, John?
They're about 40 to 45% behind in terms of equivalent dollars to the U.S. pilots flying exactly the same pieces of equipment. Wow. So there's a significant gap, and I think that the pilots have been very strong in terms of making sure that Air Canada understands that the pilots are all behind this push, and I think that Air Canada really has to step up to the plate and really recognize that they've had a nice little vacation from pilot wage increases, and I think it's time for Air Canada to recognize that there's a need to do something.
Okay, John, so September 15th, less than a week away. Air Canada passengers with flights coming up in a couple of weeks are probably pretty nervous right now and confused about what to do. So what would a strike mean for them? I know I've heard of refunds, but what are their options?
Oh, I think that once they start moving into a pre-strike planning perspective, and you start doing what Air Canada's announced today, which is starting to wind down their operations as of Sunday of this weekend, those flights that are canceled, passengers will be refunded. There is no question about withholding anything or giving you flight credit for it. That is really a refund process. And if you're booked on flights beyond September 15th or beyond September 17th or 18th, my advice has been all along to basically look at getting yourself a plan B and try to book yourself onto another carrier with a fully refundable ticket, so that in the event that this strike does get settled, and there's a 50-50 chance of that at least you have the refundable ticket from your other carrier that you can refund. But, Plan B in this case is very much part of the modus operandi for passengers.
John, I'm curious because we talk a lot about Air Canada as sort of being the largest national carrier in this country, and the financial sort of struggles they've had, they're always very up and down, as you well know. Could Air Canada afford a 45% potential, wage hike to its 5,200 or so pilots? That seems like, in terms of like the future fate of the airline and, the bottom line, ultimately, could the airline handle that?
Yes, it can. Okay. There's no doubt about it. I think Air Canada has made significant improvements in its financial performance over the last few years. Sometime we talk about what this wage increase will mean to Air Canada's bottom line. Yeah, it's going to be about a $500 million hit. But, the market's already discounted that. The share prices have been wallowing in the $18 range, $15, $16, $17 range. And I think that, the market really understands that Air Canada is going to have some significant wage increases for these pilots. The question is, the pilots are wanting somewhere between 40 and 45%. I'm not sure what Air Canada's been offering. And Air Canada, rumors are going around last week that they were offering 30%, but that's an old offer that was made about a year ago. Right. Nobody's talking at Air Canada in terms of what they're looking to offer the pilots. So there's still a major gap to talk about between the pilots and Air Canada.
And John, we know that the federal government stepped in to stop a disruption to train service. Any chance that they might step in here?
There's always a chance. The question would be, how did they do it? We've seen the CIRB, step in with the rail strike, but that was a national strike. That really was where you had no alternative but to get the rail moving again. In this case, you have airline. Yes, Air Canada is the largest, but there's a lot of capacity out there in the marketplace. This is not a peak travel period, so between WestJet, Porter, Flair, there's a lot of capacity out there in the marketplace to handle any disruption that Air Canada might have. So there is no national emergency associated with an Air Canada strike, and I think Air Canada has to recognize that and has to negotiate in full faith with the pilots.
Okay, we'll see what can happen between now and the 15th. Of course, the clock is clearly ticking. John Gradek, really appreciate the analysis this morning. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Have a great day.
And you.
You too.